The cold crushes breath. That is what the witnesses remember first. Not the screams, not the smoke, but the biting winter air that streamed through the Randolph Street doors and filled the Iroquois Theatre lobby with the scent of wool and snow and the perfume of women who had traveled downtown by streetcar, their children bundled in coats and scarves, their gloves still damp from the morning's frost. Outside, Chicago presses forward on a Wednesday afternoon in late December. The loop festooned with garlands and brass bells that ring when streetcars turn corners, merchants calling out prices on woolen goods, families hurrying past plate glass windows draped with tinsel and ribbon. Inside, beneath the ornate plasterwork and velvet curtains, 2,000 souls settle into seats, balcony railings, standing room at the back of the gallery. Children tug at gloves, mothers smooth skirts, teachers count heads, the lights dim. The orchestra swells. On stage, a fantastical kingdom blooms in blue and gold. Actors in silk and powder sing about moonlight. High above them, unseen, a single arc lamp burns too close to a length of muslin. The filament glows, the fabric trembles, a spark falls. And in the moment before the fire announces itself, the theater holds its breath, suspended in the last seconds of beauty before history consumes it. The theater is 37 days old. It opened on November 23, 1903, after delays caused by labor strikes and unexplained failures by architect Benjamin Marshall to complete drawings on time. The owners, Will J. Davis and Harry J. Powers, rushed construction to capture the lucrative holiday season, advertising the Iroquois as absolutely fireproof. Drama critics praised it. Walter K. Hill of the New York Clipper called it the most beautiful in Chicago, a temple of marble and plate glass, plush and mahogany, with a promenade foyer 60 feet high and grand, staircases ascending on either side. The backstage area is massive, 5 levels of dressing rooms, an elevator for actors, a fly gallery large enough to hold 280 drops of painted canvas scenery, all suspended by ropes, all coated in oil paint, many cut into delicate lacework or fashioned from sheer gauze. The stage measures 53 feet deep and 110 feet wide. The rigging loft towers above it. The building cost $1.1 million, but the construction is incomplete. Fire escapes end without ladders. Skylights meant to vent smoke have been nailed shut. Exit doors lack proper markings. The sprinkler system was never installed. There is no fire alarm. There is no telephone. The only firefighting equipment consists of 6 tubes of kill fire powder, a patent fire retardant that is ineffective on large blazes, stored backstage. John Sallers, the theater's lone fireman, inspected the building before opening and expressed concerns. His concerns were noted. Nothing was done. The curtain is pale blue, draped from the fly gallery like a banner of sky. When the spark touches it, the flame moves upward, not down, climbing the cloth with a whisper, a flicker, a sudden orange glow that catches the eye of a dancer in the wings. She pauses mid-step. The conductor does not see it. The audience does not see it. But backstage, in the labyrinth of ropes and sandbags and hanging scenery, stagehand William McMullen, perched on a catwalk amid the canvas flats, sees a bit of gauze brush against the hot reflector behind a calcium arc spotlight. A tiny flame erupts. He reaches to crush it with his hand. It is 2 inches beyond his reach. The fire spreads, racing up the muslin curtain, feeding on oil paint and dry fabric. McMullen shouts. Another stagehand grabs a stick and tries to beat out the flames. The fire is too high. He grabs one of the kill fire tubes and throws powder at the base of the blaze. The powder arcs through the air, misses, and scatters uselessly across the stage floor. The fire climbs higher. The muslin curtain burns away entirely, and now the flame finds the canvas drops. 280 pieces of scenery hanging so close together they are nearly touching. The fire leaps from one to the next. Heat pools against the ceiling. On stage, the double octet continues to sing, "In the Pale Moonlight." 8 men and 8 women, dressed in costumes that sparkle under the blue stage lights, execute their steps. One dancer stops singing. Another points. The audience begins to murmur. Eddie Foy is in his dressing room, applying makeup for his next scene. He wears tights, comic shoes, a short smock, a sort of abbreviated Mother Hubbard, and a ridiculous wig with a little pigtail, curving upward from the back of his head. He is playing Sister Anne in Mr. Bluebeard, a musical comedy that has packed the theater all through Christmas week. His 6-year-old son, Brian, sits on a stool in the first entrance at the right of the stage, near the switchboard, watching the performance. Foy tried to get a seat for him, but the house was sold out. More than 1,700 people are in the auditorium. Some reports claim 2,300, though the theater's official capacity is 1,602. The managers admit to selling a few hundred standing room tickets, but witnesses say there were far more. The gallery is jammed with mothers and children. Teachers and college students on winter vacation fill the balconies. Parties of teenage girls sit in clusters. Foy looks out over the crowd during the first act and thinks he has never seen so many women and children in a single audience. He hears a commotion. His first thought is that the stage hands are fighting again. There had been a row a few days before, but the noise swells. He jerks his door open. He smells smoke. His first thought is for Brian. Foy runs downstairs and into the wings. 40 seconds have elapsed since he heard the first commotion. Already the terror is beginning. The lower borders on the stage's right side are aflame. Fire leaps up into the flies. On stage, the octet continues to sing, though the girls' voices are beginning to falter. Foy finds Brian in his place, frightened but unharmed. He seizes the boy and starts toward the rear exit, but the image of the audience, hundreds of women and children, haunts him. He must do what he can to save them. He tosses Brian into the arms of a stagehand, possibly Harry or Henry Schroeder, an unconfirmed member of the company, and shouts, "Take my boy out." He watches the man run toward the rear doors. Then he turns and runs onto the stage, right through the ranks of the octet. One of the girls faints. A man picks her up and carries her off. Foy reaches the footlights. He raises both hands. His voice cuts through the rising murmur. "Do not move. Stay calm. There is no danger." He turns to Antonio Frosolono, the Italian-born orchestra leader who had been misidentified in later reports as a fat German violinist. "Play. Start an overture? Anything, but play." Some musicians are already fleeing, but Frosolono sticks, his violin bow moving furiously, though no one can hear him now over the roar of the flames and the rising tide of fear that sweeps through the rows of seats. The stage manager shouts an order. A stagehand yanks a lever. High above, the asbestos safety curtain begins to descend, a heavy sheet designed to seal the stage from the auditorium, to trap fire and smoke and heat behind the proscenium arch. It drops 6 feet, 12, 20, then it stops. A wire used for an aerial ballet act. A performer was to fly over the heads of the audience in a coming scene, has been raised into position and now catches the edge of the curtain. The curtain hangs there, motionless, halfway down the proscenium opening. A gap remains, 500 square feet of open air connecting the stage to the auditorium. Stagehands pull the lever again. The curtain does not move. Foy shouts into the wings. The asbestos curtain. For God's sake, doesn't anybody know how to lower this curtain? On stage, chunks of burning scenery begin to fall. A flat painted to look like a palace wall crashes down, scattering sparks. Dancers scream and run. Foy backs away from the fire, still shouting to the audience. "Go slow, people. You'll get out." But his voice is lost beneath the roar. In the gallery, a woman stands, then another. A man pushes past his neighbor, heading for the aisle. In the dress circle, mothers grab their children's hands and pull them toward the exits. In the orchestra section, closest to the stage, people begin to move. Slowly at first, then faster, then in a chaotic scramble toward the foyer doors. The rear stage door opens. A performer, frantic to escape, shoves it wide and stumbles into the alley behind the theater. Cold wind rushes in. The temperature outside is near zero. An icy gale howls through the streets. The fire inhales. For a single moment, the flames seem to pause, gathering themselves. Then the backdraft strikes. Air and fuel combine in an instant. The fire explodes forward, ducking beneath the jammed curtain, roaring out into the auditorium in a single monstrous wave. Eddie Foy describes it as a flash and a roar, as when a heap of loose powder is fired all at once. Many spectators later describe it as an explosion, a great ball of fire. The fireball passes over the heads of those in the orchestra section. Those seated closest to the stage feel the heat singe their hair but do not burn, and races upward toward the vents at the back of the dress circle and gallery. Those vents, designed to allow smoke to escape, have been nailed shut. The fireball strikes them and rebounds, spreading outward, igniting curtains, upholstery, clothing, hair. In the gallery, the air turns black. People scream. A shower of blazing fragments falls over Foy. His wig begins to smolder. A fringe on the edge of the curtain above his head is burning. The curtain itself is disintegrating. It is thin, not wire-reinforced, another cost-cutting measure. The lights go out. The electrical switchboard, mounted near the stage, has been consumed by the fire. The theater plunges into darkness. Only the glow of the flames remains, casting wild shadows across the walls, illuminating the chaos unfolding in the aisles. In the dress circle, a woman stumbles, falls, and is trampled by the crowd surging toward the stairs. In the gallery, a child loses his mother's hand and is swept backward, pinned against a railing. At the base of the stairway that leads down to the foyer, bodies begin to pile up. 10 people, 20, 50. They fall on top of one another, crushed by the weight of those behind them, asphyxiated by smoke. Pressed into the corners where the stairs meet the walls, the stairways become one long mass of bodies. Wherever turns or landings cause a worse jam, the dead are piled 7 or 8 feet deep. An iron gate, installed to prevent gallery patrons from sneaking down to the more expensive dress circle seats, blocks the way. The gate is locked. A few people reach it and rattle the bars. Most do not make it that far. The gallery stairway is clogged. At the base, where it meets the dress circle stairway, the corpses are stacked 10 feet high. Some died from smoke inhalation. Others were crushed. Many simply suffocated, pressed so tightly against the bodies around them that they could not draw breath. Heel prints on the dead faces mutely testify to the cruel fact that human animals stricken by terror are as mad and ruthless as stampeding cattle. Many bodies have the clothes torn from them, some have the flesh trodden from their bones. The orchestra patrons on the ground floor can reach the foyer and the front doors. They pour out onto Randolph Street, coughing, weeping, some with clothing scorched, others unharmed but shaking with shock. Behind them, in the balconies, the fire burns with a heat that melts brass railings and chars the plaster walls. The exits are marked, or rather, they are not marked. Some are hidden behind heavy portieres, some are locked, others are equipped with bascule-type latches imported from Europe, unfamiliar to most Americans. The doors require a specific motion, a lift and a twist, to unlatch. In the darkness, with smoke filling the hallway, no one can make them work. People pound on the wood, they scream, they pull harder, the doors remain shut. Behind them, the crowd presses forward, a mass of bodies driven by terror and unbearable heat. Some are crushed against the doors, others fall and are trampled. In one passageway that appears to lead to an exit, 200 people pile up, only to discover that the door at the end is not a door at all. It is a decorative panel, painted to look like an exit. They die there, stacked against the wall, their hands clawed and bleeding. 30 exits exist in the theater, but few patrons can find them. The fire escapes are made of iron. They cling to the north wall of the theater. Narrow staircases that descend into Couch Place, the alley that separates the Iroquois from the Northwestern University building. The gallery exit opens onto one of these fire escapes. The door is hidden behind a curtain. Most patrons do not know it exists, but some find it, pulled open by a man who tears the fabric aside, and they step through into the freezing air, onto a landing slick with ice. The fire escape descends in zigzag flights, each section barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. Smoke pours from the doorway. Flames lick the edges of the frame. The people on the fire escape begin to climb down, but the stairs are steep and treacherous. The fire escapes are incomplete. Some lack exterior ladders down to the ground. A woman slips, falls against the railing, and tumbles over the edge. She drops 3 stories and strikes the pavement. Another woman trying to help a child loses her balance and follows. The bodies pile up in the alley below. Others, trapped on the upper landings, cling to the railings, screaming for help. Across the alley, in the northwestern building, a group of students and painters hears the screams. They lean out the windows and see the fire escapes crowded with people, the smoke billowing from the theater, the flames visible through the windows. One student grabs a ladder. He and his companions shove it across the gap between the buildings, bridging the alley. The ladder wobbles. The first person to attempt the crossing, a teenage girl, crawls onto the rungs, her skirt catching on the wood, her hands shaking. She reaches the window on the other side and is pulled to safety. Another follows, and another. Just 12 people cross before a tongue of flame dashes against the wall of the northwestern building, and no more can escape. Many on the fire escapes choose to jump rather than burn. They leap from the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor, crashing into the alley where the first bodies have already begun to freeze in the December cold. The fire department arrives at 3:33 p.m., 18 minutes after the fire began. Engine 13, stationed 6 blocks away, was alerted by a stagehand who ran all the way to South Water Street to turn in the alarm. There was no fire alarm box in or near the theater. The firefighters pull their hoses into Couch Place, but the alley is too narrow for the aerial ladders. Smoke obscures everything. They cannot see the fire escapes. They cannot see the people clinging to the railings. They hear screams, but the smoke is too thick to locate the source. Inside the theater, the fire has already consumed most of the flammable material. The stage is a skeleton of charred wood and twisted metal. The curtains are gone. The scenery is ash. As Eddie Foy flees the stage, the last man to leave, he believes, the last of the ropes holding up the drops burn through, and with them the whole loft collapses with a terrifying crash, bringing down tons of burning material. At that instant, all the lights in the house go out, and another great balloon of flame leaps out into the auditorium, licking even the ceiling and killing scores who have not yet succeeded in escaping from the gallery. The fire burns itself out within minutes, leaving behind only the glow of embers and the acrid stench of burnt fabric and flesh. From the start of the fire until all the audience had either escaped or been killed, or were lying maimed in the halls and alleys, the time was 8 minutes, in some accounts 15. The discrepancy reflects the chaos. No one is certain when the fire began or when it ended, only that it happened impossibly fast. Firefighters force open the front doors on Randolph Street and step inside. The foyer is empty. The orchestra section is empty. The wooden parts of the seats remain intact. Only the plush upholstery has burned, but the stairways are not empty. The first firefighter to reach the gallery stairway stops, staring at the wall of bodies that blocks the passage. He calls for help. More men arrive. They begin the work of untangling the dead, pulling corpses free one at a time, carrying them down the stairs and out into the street. A fire chief thrusts his head through a side exit and shouts, "Is anybody alive in here?" Not a sound is heard in reply. The few not dead are insensible or dying. The bodies are laid in rows on the sidewalk. Snow begins to fall, dusting the corpses, the coats, the faces of children. Blankets are draped over them. A temporary morgue is set up in Dyche's drugstore across the street. Another morgue is established in the saloon next door. Within 10 minutes from the beginning of the fire, bodies are being laid on the sidewalks, and all the ambulances and dead wagons in the city cannot keep up with the ghastly harvest. Families begin to arrive, searching for children, for wives, for friends. Some find their loved ones among the rows of dead. Others search for hours and find nothing. Many of the bodies are unrecognizable, burned beyond identification. Mothers wander the morgue, lifting blankets, looking for a familiar ring, a scrap of clothing, anything that might tell them if this child was theirs. By evening, the final count is still uncertain. Firefighters continue to pull bodies from the theater. 575 are confirmed dead by nightfall. Within 24 hours, Chicago knows that at least 587 are dead, and fully as many more injured. Over the following weeks, dozens more die from injuries, burns, broken bones, smoke inhalation. The final toll is estimated at 602. Most are women and children. Most are from Chicago's wealthiest families, teachers, society wives, their daughters and sons. 41 Chicago public school teachers are among the dead. The Christmas holiday, meant to be a time of joy, becomes a week of funerals. Churches are filled with coffins. Cemeteries open new sections to accommodate the dead. Montrose, Calvary, Graceland, Oak Woods. Every cemetery in the city receives bodies from the Iroquois fire. Some families bury multiple children in a single grave. Others bury no one because no body was ever found. 32-year-old Lucy Wolfe Garn took her youngest sister, 12-year-old Harriet Wolfe, and Lucy's two boys, 8-year-old William Willie Joseph Garn and 11-year-old Frank John Ludwig Garn Jr., to the matinee performance, along with their seamstress, 45-year-old Bertha Burke. All 5 perished. They were the daughters and grandsons of Ludwig Wolfe, a wealthy and prominent Chicago industrialist, founder of L. Wolfe Manufacturing Co., known as the Enamelware King. Lucy's husband, Frank Warren Garn, a corporate secretary in one of his father-in-law's companies, searched morgues and hospitals through the night. The city closed the morgues around midnight. Police and morgue workers needed time to shift bodies and organize victim lists. The bodies of Lucy, Frank Jr., Willie, and Harriet were found the next day. Their funeral was held on Sunday, January 3, 1904, at Ludwig Wolfe's home at 1319 Washington Boulevard. They were buried in Metzgar Cemetery in Helena, Ohio. Frank Garn remarried in 1909 to Jeanette Adams. They had 3 children, including a daughter given the middle name of Lucille. Ludwig Wolfe's obituaries in 1911, lengthy accounts of his business achievements, his $1.25 million estate, his 7 domestic servants, omitted mention of his daughters and grandchildren lost at the Iroquois 8 years before. In the days following the fire, the newspapers published lists of the dead. The Chicago Tribune devotes its entire front page to names, columns of names, alphabetized, hundreds of them, each one a life that ended in the darkness of the gallery, in the crush of the stairway, in the frozen alley behind the theater. The city enters a period of mourning, unlike anything it has known since the Great Fire of 1871. But that fire destroyed buildings. This fire destroyed families. The city shuts down 170 theaters. In the weeks following the disaster, every theater, hall, and church is re-inspected. 6,000 people lose their jobs. The inspections reveal violations in nearly every building. Locked exits, inadequate fire escapes, no sprinklers, no alarms. The Iroquois, billed as absolutely fireproof, had been a death trap from the moment it opened. The investigations begin within a week. A coroner's inquest calls 200 witnesses. Firefighters testify. Stagehands testify. Survivors testify. The testimony reveals a catalog of negligence. The theater had no sprinkler system, no fire alarm, no telephone. The exits were unmarked or hidden. The doors opened inward, making them impossible to open once a crowd pressed against them. The fire escapes were improperly installed, some without ladders to the ground. The safety curtain was not made of asbestos, but of wood pulp mixed with asbestos fiber, a material that burned as easily as paper, thin and not wire reinforced. The skylights above the stage, designed to vent smoke, had been nailed shut. The kill fire extinguishers were useless. The theater had been billed as absolutely fireproof in its advertisements. Fire inspectors had toured the building before it opened and found it satisfactory. But those inspectors, it is later revealed, had been given free tickets to performances. They had overlooked violations. The theater had opened on schedule, just in time for the lucrative holiday season, despite the fact that construction was still incomplete. Many stagehands were in a saloon across the street when the fire started. No fire drills had ever been practiced. The house force had no training. If firefighting apparatus was available, no one used it or knew how. The owners, Will J. Davis and Harry J. Powers, issue statements blaming the audience for panicking. The architect insists that the exits were adequate. Mayor Carter Harrison, who had ordered a review of theater safety just months before the fire, is arrested and charged. The charges are later dismissed. Davis and Powers are indicted on 575 counts of manslaughter. Their defense attorney, Levy Mayer, argues that no single person can be held responsible for the disaster. The case drags on for 3 years. Motions are filed, technicalities are invoked, witnesses disappear. In the end, no one is convicted, no fines are paid. The only person to serve jail time is a tavern keeper whose saloon had been used as a temporary morgue. He is convicted of robbing the dead, but the fire does not end in the courtroom. New laws are passed. Doors must open outward. Exits must be marked with illuminated signs. Fire curtains must be made of steel or asbestos interwoven with wire. Sprinklers must be installed. Fire drills must be practiced. Panic bars, devices that allow doors to be opened from the inside by pressing on a horizontal bar, are developed and become standard in public buildings across the United States. The red exit sign, illuminated by a source of light independent of the main electrical system, becomes ubiquitous in theaters, schools, and office buildings. The changes spread beyond Chicago. Cities across the country and around the world adopt similar codes. In New York, theaters eliminate standing room. In London, fire safety regulations are tightened. The Iroquois fire becomes a turning point in the history of building safety. It is studied, analyzed, memorialized. These changes save lives, but they do not erase the memory of the 602 who died in 8 to 15 minutes on a winter afternoon in Chicago. The Iroquois Theatre itself does not die. The building survives. The exterior is barely damaged. The auditorium, though scorched, is structurally sound. 9 months after the fire, the theater reopens as Hyde and Baymen's Music Hall. In October 1905, it is renamed the Colonial Theater. Performances resume, audiences return, though some complain of cold spots, of unexplained drafts, of voices heard in empty hallways. The theater operates for 20 more years before it is demolished in 1925 to make way for the Oriental Theater, which in turn is renamed the Nederlander Theater in 2019. The site remains a theater, but the memory of the fire lingers. Survivors speak of it for the rest of their lives. Families pass down stories of mothers who shielded children, of teachers who led students to safety, of strangers who pulled bodies from the alley. Eddie Foy becomes a national figure. His act of bravery, standing on stage, trying to calm the crowd, recounted in newspapers across the country. But he questions himself. Did his urging them to remain calm delay their escape? Did his presence on stage keep them in their seats too long? He never sleeps well again. His nerves do not subside to normal pitch for weeks, months, years. He writes about the fire in his 1928 autobiography, Clowning Through Life, but the words cannot capture the horror of what he saw, the sound of the flames, the image of the bodies piled in the stairways. Memorials are erected. Lorado Taft sculpts a bronze bas-relief depicting a bereaved mother bending over the body of a child. The sculpture is installed in Iroquois Memorial Hospital, built to honor the victims. When the hospital is demolished in 1951, the memorial is moved to City Hall, where it remains. Andrew Kircher, founder of Montrose Cemetery, erects a monument 5 years after the fire. Chicago holds an annual memorial service at City Hall until the last survivors die. The fire is studied in architecture schools, in fire safety courses, in history classes. It becomes a case study in how systems fail and how complacency and corruption and haste can combine to create catastrophe. It becomes a lesson in the cost of cutting corners, of prioritizing profit over safety, of ignoring warnings. In the end, what remains is not the fire itself, but the silence that follows. The silence of the gallery stairway, empty now, where voices once called for help. The silence of the alley where bodies fell. The silence of the families who buried their children in the frozen ground of December and never spoke of it again. The fire consumed 602 lives in 8 to 15 minutes. It took 3 years of legal wrangling to assign blame, and in the end, no one was held accountable. But the fire did not end in 1903. It continued in the laws that were rewritten, in the doors that were redesigned, in the exit signs that glow red in every theater, in every school, in every building where people gather. The fire continued in the memory of a city that learned, too late, that beauty and grandeur are not the same as safety, that a theater can be ornate and deadly, that absolutely fireproof is a promise no building can keep. The fire continued in the knowledge that 602 people died because someone, somewhere, decided that speed and profit mattered more than exits, more than sprinklers, more than unlocked doors, and it continues still. in the empty space where the Iroquois once stood, in the plaques and memorials that mark the site, in the history books that recount the disaster, in the silence that falls when the story is told. The last image is not of flames, but of frost. Couch Place on the evening of December 30th, 1903, after the bodies have been removed and the firefighters have left. The alley is empty. Ice covers the pavement. Snow begins to fall, dusting the windowsills of the theater, the fire escapes, the bricks of the northwestern building. The cold, which had fueled the fire, now buries it. The city moves forward, but the alley remembers. The iron fire escapes remember. The walls of the building, scorched and silent, remember. And somewhere, in the archives, in the photographs, in the lists of names printed in the Tribune, the 602 remember. They were mothers and children. They were teachers and students. They were daughters of industrialists and sons of working families. They were people who went to a matinee on a Wednesday afternoon and never came home. They were the ones who died in the darkness, calling for doors that would not open, for staircases that were blocked, for fire escapes that led nowhere. They were the ones the city mourned, the ones the city failed, the ones the city promised, too late, to remember. The fire went out in minutes. The memory will never go out. The heat is gone. But the cold remains, and with it, the knowledge that safety is not a promise but a practice. Built one exit sign at a time, one unlocked door at a time, one law at a time, written in the names of those who did not escape. The panic bar, pressed by millions of hands in schools and offices and theaters, exists because 602 people could not open doors. The illuminated exit sign, glowing red in the darkness, exists because 602 people could not find their way out. The sprinkler head, mounted in ceilings across the world, exists because 602 people burned. Every safety regulation, every inspection, every fire drill, every unlocked door is a monument to the dead of the Iroquois Theatre. They did not die in vain. They died so that others would not. And in every theater, in every public building, in every space where people gather, their memory persists, not in words or statues, but in the simple act of opening a door and walking safely into the night.